Hello, 6th graders. Welcome to Big Ideas Math, 7th grade math, section 10.4, compound events lesson. Pause while you write the lesson number and title in your math notebook. Pause again while you write today's lesson objective in your math notebook. Today's objective is students will find the number of outcomes of compound events. Be sure to copy the following term and definition into your notebook exactly as it appears. The set of all possible outcomes of one or more events is called the sample space. You can use tables and tree diagrams to find the sample space of two or more events. Let's take a look at example 1. Finding a sample space. You randomly choose a crust and style of pizza. Find the sample space. How many different pizzas are possible? So we have to think about the different kinds of crusts that are offered. So you have to look over here at the menu. There's thin crust or stuffed crust. And styles are Hawaiian, Mexican, pepperoni, and veggie. So those are the styles of pizza. So you can get a thin crust with any of those styles, or you can get a stuffed crust with any of those styles. And so these are your outcomes over here. Thin crust Hawaiian, thin crust Mexican, and so on. Stuffed crust with all those different styles. There are 8 different outcomes in the sample space. So there are 8 different pizzas possible. Copy this key idea into your notebook. It's the fundamental counting principle. An event, M, has M possible outcomes. Be sure in your notebook that you make an uppercase M and a lowercase m, because a capital M is the event and the possible outcomes is the lowercase m. An event N has N possible outcomes. So those are the same thing, uppercase and lowercase n. The total number of outcomes of an event M followed by event N is M times N. So if you think back to our pizza outcome, there were 2 types of crust, and there were 4 styles of pizza, and there were 8 outcomes. So we had M times N, which equaled 8 outcomes. So now we're going to find the total number of possible outcomes, and we will be rolling a number cube, also known as a die, and flipping a coin. So it says use a table to find the sample space. Let H equal heads and T equal tails. And then there's the number on the dice, so you can see that you could roll 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, and you can get either heads or tails. So you can get a 1H, a 1T, a 2H, a 2T, and so on. So there are 12 possible outcomes. That's because there's 6 numbers on the dice and 2 sides on the coin. 6 times 2 is 12 possible outcomes. So that was method 1, was making a table. I used method 2, the fundamental counting principle, which was identifying the number of possible outcomes for each event. Event 1 was rolling the number cube with 6 possible outcomes, and event 2 was flipping the coin with 2 possible outcomes. So we came up with 12. Example 3, we're going to find the total number of possible outcomes again. We have clothes in our closet. How many different outfits can we make from the t-shirts, jeans, and shoes in the closet? So we're going to use our fundamental counting principle. Identify the number of possible outcomes for each event. We have 7 t-shirts, so choosing a t-shirt has 7 possible outcomes. Choosing jeans has 4 possible outcomes, and choosing shoes has 3 possible outcomes. So 7 times 4 is 28, times 3 equals 84 possible outcomes, or 84 different outfits. So copy this term and definition into your notebook. A compound event consists of two or more events. As with a single event, the probability of a compound event is the ratio of the number of favorable outcomes to the total number of possible outcomes. Favorable wow, that's kind of messy, over possible. You are familiar with that ratio. So example 4, we are finding the probability of a compound event. So in example 2, so if we were to slide our slides back, what is the probability of rolling a number greater than 4 and flipping tails? So it says there are 2 favorable outcomes in the sample space for rolling a number greater than 4 and flipping tails. So there's 5 tails and 6 tails. So that's 2 favorable outcomes, and we already figured out that the number of possible outcomes was 12. So the probability of rolling greater than 4 and flipping tails is 2 out of 12, which when we simplify is 1/6. So the probability is 1/6, or 16 2/3%. So let's practice again, finding the probability of a compound event. You flip 3 nickels. What is the probability of flipping 2 heads and 1 tails? So we have to remember that when we flip a coin, what we have flipped in the past does not ever affect what we flip in the future. So these are isolated incidents. They are independent events is what we call that. So we're going to use a tree diagram to find the sample space. So let H equal heads and T equal tails. So there are 3 favorable outcomes in the sample space for flipping 2 heads and 1 tail. Head, head, tails, head, tails, head, and tails, head, head. So the probability of the event is the number of favorable outcomes over the number of possible outcomes. So our favorable event is 2 heads and 1 tail. So that we found out that there were 3 ways to get that, and there are 8 possible outcomes. So the probability is 3 over 8, or 37.5%. Remember, to be completed with your flip lesson, you need to have your notes, your vocabulary, and any other assignments. You also need to have any questions and a good attitude as always.